Do you opt for a road bike or a triathlon bike for your next triathlon? Conventional wisdom suggests that for a triathlon, the dedicated triathlon bike with its optimised aerodynamics and integrated storage will be best. But what if that course looks like this? Now, in terms of speed, we know that a triathlon bike is the best when it comes to a relatively flat course, but many of the courses that we have to tackle these days are not just flat. What if that course has some lumps, bumps, maybe even a few twists in there? Heck, what if it has mountains in there? Which bike is best then? Well, those eagle-eyed viewers out there will recognise exactly where I am right now, and given the time of the year, it's probably a little bit obvious. I'm, of course, on the Ironman Nice course, also host to the Ironman World Championships, or part of it at least. It's a notoriously cheeky course, which I've decided today to use parts of that course to help you choose which bike is right for you. Talking of which, let's run you through the bikes I've brought today. Representing the road bike, I have the new Canyon Aeroad CFR. It's classified as an aero road bike, although, of course, all bikes blur the lines these days, and with a weight of just over 7.5 kilograms, you could even consider this somewhat of an all-rounder. But that's not all. As many of you will know, one of the biggest upgrades that you can make to your road bike in terms of speed is a pair of aero bars. In fact, it wouldn't really be a fair test today without set. And well, we've got them integrated on the new Aeroad, something that's becoming more commonly available. And representing the triathlon bike, I have the Canyon Speedmax CFR. This is an out-and-out speed machine with some nifty triathlon integration, which we'll get onto a little later. And it hits the scales at a little over 9.5 kilograms. Okay, so I want to test the two bikes over a hilly section, a flat section, and a downhill section, preferably with some twisty-turny stuff in there. Now, given I'm on the Ironman World Championship course here, which is a tried and tested route, it makes sense to use that. Except I've decided to butcher it a little. I would like to do all these sections within one continuous run, so I am actually going to start with a 4-kilometre uphill against the direction of the course into a 5-kilometre out and back flat section where I will rejoin the direction of the course and back into a 4-kilometre descent to the finish. Quick disclaimer, I am aware this isn't the most scientific test. I can't control every variable out there. However, I think we're going to get some pretty good information from this. And also for the context, I'm going to try and average 220 watts for both of the runs. That means I'm going to have to push a little bit harder on the uphill and the flat to get that average when you take into account the descent. But also, we'll be able to get the times from each of those sections for some good analysis after. Right, let's do this. Okay, not the results I was expecting at all. So a quick run through my times. On the triathlon bike, I averaged 221 watts, pretty good. 34 minutes and 28 seconds over that roughly 20-kilometre course. On the road bike, I averaged 218 watts and a time of 34 minutes and 17 seconds. So the road bike was quicker by 11 seconds. Who'd have thought it? Now, I actually did some modelling on this course on Best Bike Split before today for different profiles. So I knew it was going to be close, but I actually had it in favour of the triathlon bike by 11 seconds for 220 watts. Now, of interest, I also modelled it at 300 watts, and again in favour of the triathlon bike now by 13 seconds. And at the other end of the scale, I also did it at 120 watts. I also changed the positioning and setup to a slightly more comfortable setup, and there was just a 2-second difference, again in favour of the triathlon bike. So what went on? Well, it was basically all on the climb where significant differences happened. The road bike was 21 seconds quicker, and most of that actually happened in the first 2.5 kilometers with an average gradient of 6%. And then we actually had similar splits for the final 1.5 kilometers of that climb where the gradient shallowed out. On the flat section, as expected, the Triathlon bike was quicker by 11 seconds, which, gotta say, really impressed the road bike was that close on that, although I will say I felt really good on the Triathlon bike. It felt like a really sustainable position. And finally, the descent. I think we all assumed that the road bike would be quicker, and it was, but maybe by not quite as much as you'd expect. It was only a second quicker than the Triathlon bike. Yes, it does feel more agile, but actually, I felt fine on the Triathlon bike, and I guess I have a lot of experience on the Triathlon bike and feel quite comfortable with it, which is something we'll get onto later. Now, if I'm honest, these are not the results I was expecting. So I've been trying to work it out a little bit too. Now, within the topic of aero versus weight, we know that aerodynamics becomes less of a factor under 15 kilometers an hour, around 9 miles per hour. Now, as a ballpark figure, this tends to be around a 7.5% gradient for a good or elite level cyclist. Obviously, for an amateur, their speed will drop off on lower gradients and could be as low as around 4.5%. Well, remember I said I lost a lot of time in that first 2.5 kilometers? Well, I was literally teetering around that 15 kilometer per hour mark. So when you consider this bike is 2 kilograms lighter and still incredibly aero, it starts to make a lot of sense. Yeah, I perhaps underestimated this bike. Now, to be clear, I absolutely loved this bike and actually had a strong feeling coming today that it might surprise us a little bit. In fact, it sort of fueled the idea for today's video, but I didn't quite expect it to completely flip the results on me. Now, whilst it's not as aero as an out-and-out triathlon bike, the R&D that they've put into this, along with the integration of the aero bars, this is a seriously impressive bike, and that really showed on that flat section of my course. Which is worth pointing out, had I come today with a slightly less aero road bike, I suspect we would have seen slightly different results. In fact, it's something that James tested last year on the channel, out on the Ironman Nice course, specifically looking at the right bike for the course, where he used a lightweight climbing bike. And if you would like to see the results for that, I will link that in the description just down below. But in summary, as it was a less aero road bike, he saw a bigger difference between the triathlon bike and the road bike on the flat sections of the course. After all, I do appreciate that the road bike I've used today is a top of the line aero road bike. There are many variations of a road bike to consider, along with the course that you may be undertaking. But that's not all. Of course, I just conjured up this 20-kilometer route today. I could have easily extended out that middle flat section of the course and we'd have seen different results again. But it's given us very good food for thought. But there's still a rather big elephant in the room that we need to address. Ginormous, actually. You may have noticed that I didn't bring the bikes laden with front hydration systems, rear bottle cages, aero bottles and other tri-paraphernalia. We all have different preferences and setup choices, so I've actually tried to keep the bikes as simple as possible and not muddy the water. Instead, I've made sure that everything's the same. So I had the same wheels, same tyre choices, same pressures. I also had the same bar setup, or as close to as possible. However, should I want to stay in the aero bars on the road bike whilst drinking, I'd have to add on an additional front hydration system. If I wanted bottles behind the saddle, I'd have to add cages on. If I wanted to carry gels, I'd have to put a bento box on. If I wanted to carry spares, I'd have to attach them to the frame somewhere. Well, this is where the triathlon bike comes into its own. This was its calling. Now, if I wanted, I could have an internal bladder within the frame here with a straw poking out. We've got inbuilt bento box. We've got an inbuilt storage compartment for spares down here. We've got the option for rear hydration that we've mounted seamlessly to the seat post here. These are features that you'll find on a lot of dedicated triathlon bikes these days. So suddenly those aero gains of the tri-bike actually start to extend out further, particularly as you hit the flat sections of the course. Now, personally for me, it's hard to look past the practicality of a triathlon bike for a triathlon, but also the comfort. Now today I actually raised the saddle height and brought it forwards on the road bike, so it was optimised for the aero bars, which, to be honest, if you're using aero bars on a road bike, is something that everyone should do. And whilst it was comfortable, nothing really beats the geometry of a triathlon bike for really laying down the power in the aero bars. They are literally designed to allow you into a more aero position and to be able to sustain it for extended periods of time. But that's just me. I've ridden triathlon bikes for years. And I guess the same applies to you. This is probably the main point of today's video, really. It needs to be the bike that you are most comfortable on. And if that is a road bike, then so be it. Just make sure you whack some aero bars on them. Well, every course is different though. A course that has tons of flat sections in, absolutely plays into the hands of a triathlon bike. A course that has loads of climbing, descending and zero flat sections, absolutely plays into the hands of a road bike. A course that has a bit of everything, well, the choice is yours. As I've said, the main thing is that you are confident and comfortable on that bike. We'd love to hear from you guys though. What is your experience? Which bike would you choose? Is it always a triathlon bike no matter what? Or do you actually like the comfort of a road bike? Let us know in the comment section down below. If you've enjoyed today's video, please do give it a thumbs up, give it a like. See you next time.